So we've got a terrific panel coming up here. Tavier Taylor, Board Advisor and CTO at TFM Innovations. David Kavanaugh, CTO at Tillo. Kaiser Mazhar, CTO at IG Group. And moderating our panel today, Glenn Roberts, CTO at Fention. Please join us on stage. All right, Glenn, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's been a great 2 days so far. As you've noticed, a lot of AI has been talked about over the last 2 days. Today's no different. So so rather than what actually says up there, engineering Flux, AI is actually rewriting our jobs, not just the code. So today we're discussing what has changed, what's broken, and what we're doing differently. So I'll allow the panelists to introduce themselves. So Kazir, please go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Kaiser Mazhar. I run UK and Ireland technology for IG Group, which is a trading platform. And I've got people distributed around the world and have been using AI in the org for quite a while now. But it's still a learning journey, so still lots to learn.
Great. David?
Thank you. David Kavanagh, CPTO at Tillo as of recently, a fintech, about 10 years old. In the gift card and reward space. Also, I am an advisor to a Series A company called Just Move In. Between the two, we're doing different things in AI, but of course, always learning.
Great. And Tavier?
Hi, Tavier Taylor, and I am actually a fractional CTO and board advisor. I work supporting boards and execs around digital transformation and AI governance, usually when the transformation has gone wrong, and to make sure that there's governance and accountability and propping them up and setting them up for success when I leave, to make sure that they have decision ownership as well as transparency in the organization around whether it's upgrading legacy systems or either accountability in their day-to-day operations.
Fantastic. All right then. So let's start off with probably the most interesting question. Start off with Kazir. So what has AI actually changed in your day-to-day over the last year or two?
I think the interesting thing is it's always changing. There's extra stuff that's always something new that we're introducing. But I think one of the things that's been really quite exciting is the way that we've been able to force multiply our processes and force multiply the output that teams do. But the real kind of big changes around how we can change the outcomes. So doing a lot of work to kind of reorientate the way that teams think about progress and getting things done. And so, yeah, there's lots of benefits that we can get, but if your processes and your ways of working are not set up correctly, you can just force multiply the bad stuff. So that's been quite an interesting kind of journey that we've been going through.
Sure. And you gave me an example previously of React Native being a change for you.
Yeah, so we are replatforming our technologies. So we moved from native apps and moving towards a React Native and React websites, so React Native on the apps. And so we've got some native iOS and Android engineers that are using AI to generate the React Native version of the code. And that's been super smooth and easy for them to kind of translate between the two. They know the existing apps really, really well. And they've been able to get up to speed to create a React Native version without necessarily being a super expert in React Native itself. But the transition has been way faster than if they were expected to learn that from scratch and then redevelop the platform.
Yeah, that's definitely a big enabler. What about for you, David?
Change in the last 12 months. I think we're at the stage where I can say that that's an AI-enhanced photo of me, for one. But let's get real. I think, without getting too dark, I think there's a bit of a division opening up that I see in our organization, but when I speak to other leaders as well, between people who like to code and people who like to build and people that are hanging on to the craft of coding and resisting AI. And then there's some wonderful examples of people who aren't doing that, who take it as an opportunity to really build things very quickly, get things to market, split test. One engineer in our org, for example, for the last 3 months has AI generated 95% of his code and approximately doubled his output for a low cost of credits as well. And then you have a spectrum, right? So I really want to talk more about that. How do we bring people on the journey? Both sides have arguments and considerations. We should listen to both sides, but I know where I sit. I'm energized to have come from a traditional engineering background, have naturally drifted away from that with leadership, and now I can somewhat get back into it and lead the way on that. So it's an exciting time to be alive.
Sure. Would you say you're getting closer to engineering than you were before because you have to play around with Claude Code yourself?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And I'm really scratching the surface, and I'm a bit late to the game, but the reason I don't look like my AI photograph, like this weekend, I was down a rabbit hole with Claude Code, and my wife was like, "Where are you? You're not present." But yeah, it's the Bob Dylan song, "The Times Are Changing," springs to mind. Just it's if you think about it. We'll come back to another conversation, but in another question, but I have a lot to say on the subject.
Great.
Yeah.
And Tavier, as a fractional, how's your world changed?
Yeah, so my role, I sit just above the engineering level and responsible for some of the teams, but I have seen where you have the old school, we're not using AI, and then you have the other extreme where people are using the AI. But what surprised me the most about it is that those who are using AI, the level of dependency that they have on it without questioning it and without judgment, and then trying to backtrack and say, hey, look, it's fine I'm absolutely happy for you to use AI, but you need some accountability and ownership. Like, why has this failed? Like, you can't just depend on it without questioning it, but I've found that some of them will just put in the code, not question it, and not reassess the risk before they put it into production. And then it's like, this is why I'm here, because we need to take ownership and have some responsibility that if you're going to use AI, you have to be responsible and own what it is that you're saying you're going to put into the development before actually doing it.
Sure, yeah, definitely over the last couple of years, I've seen the same where it's almost like using AI, I've passed the responsibility over to the AI, and obviously we can't allow that from that perspective. So staying with you, so everyone has a productivity claim. What are you tracking? How much of your code is AI generated? David just gave a short example.
Yes, so for me, it's about how many times do you have to change it and the failure rates for AI. When you put it in, it's like, oh yeah, we're increasing in speed, so that's fine. The time it takes to go from, testing and development into production, but it's also the fact, again, is like, okay, it's in production, but we're failing, something is broken. And again, going back to that governance layer, it's like, come on, guys, think about this. Like, it's not just like looking at it from this narrow lens, and then you put it out there, and now you broke something over here. And this is why, in my case, particularly as a fractional CTO, when I come in, the transformation is delayed, but the developers are working at a faster pace, and they were like, well, why are we behind on the transformation? Again, it goes back to that accountability and actually assessing the risk. And also, I know this is coming up later, is about teaching engineers about judgment and that layer when you're interviewing and hiring engineers, and also setting them up for judgment and accountability skills as well.
Great. Kazir, essentially for you, so how much of your code is AI generated, performance improvements?
So we've done like a pilot in one area of the organization. That's a lot of like legacy code and areas of code that takes a lot of time to develop and get out the door. We've seen massive improvements in that space. So we've seen maybe 4x, maybe up to 8x in some of the engineers and some of the teams. But going back to what Tavier was saying, there's a lot around how we measure that success. So looking at DORA metrics, also changing our ways of working. So moving more towards acceptance test-driven development, moving more towards XP, so that we are delivering things iteratively, getting things out into production with good metrics in monitoring and alerting and all that kind of stuff, has enabled the team to move faster. So, we could crank out loads and loads of code, and we saw there was a talk earlier about some of these agents will generate 1 million lines of code versus far fewer in other agents. We're not measuring how much code you get out. We're measuring the output from an outcome perspective, and we're seeing really great improvements there.
So like a 4 to 8x outcome in certain
certain pockets. So that has set the benchmark for the rest of the organization to try and meet. So yeah, we are tracking metrics. We've got an AI bootcamp that everyone goes on, so everyone's got a level set, and then past that point, people can really dance in the moment and see what they kind of develop for their particular areas. We've got some platform teams, we've got some front end teams, we've got teams that deal with very complex systems, and some teams that just deal with UIs. So we're not going to see the same productivity gain across the lot, but we're trying to set the bar really high and see how far the teams can reach.
A 4x benchmark is very, very challenging target. So yeah, I'm impressed by that. David, from your side.
From my side, yeah, I'll come back to the metrics question in a minute, but take Laravel upgrades that happened recently. Traditionally, that's been quite a painful process. A lot of people involved, bugs that slip through when it hits production. We did it seamlessly in days rather than weeks recently with the use of AI. And the engineers even admitted that some of the bugs that were caught, they wouldn't have caught them in the wild. Going back to metrics, I think I'll be really honest. I think in product engineering, we've to different degrees, or I'm generalizing, but we've got away with it to an extent about how we measure productivity. I don't like we've got Dora, we've got Space, we've got many frameworks, commercial and marketing, and they're really tied to numbers. We don't tend to get, we have some quirky founders and stuff, but we don't tend to get anchored to those. What I would argue is that we need to really redefine metrics from the ground up, a different SDLC. I'm old enough to remember sort of COM to DCOM to SOAP, mobile adoption, cloud adoption, and if you think about those, they were quite slow in pockets and they took off over time. But AI, we're all doing it together. There's this thing that economists call the productivity paradox. And if you look at electricity, which I don't remember when that came in, but when that came in, they came into Victorian steam factories, and the productivity gains weren't realized for about 20 years. Why? Because they had the same old pulley systems and steam in the middle of the factory, and they didn't redesign the factory around electricity. And that's why in the 1920s you saw Ford and other companies just, the productivity exploded. And I'd argue that, we need that sort of a shake-up here because, we're kind of trying to shoehorn AI into a craft that has been absent of AI for the last 20, 30 years. And it hasn't been long, right, since we've been writing code. We use punch cards. I don't remember that either, but I've heard tell. So yeah, a shake-up. And quite honestly, we're, to finish my point, we're trying to define an operating model, not just for engineering, but for product and design as well, where we're more explicit around that because there's fear, trepidation, and people just aren't in our teams aren't mind readers. So we have to sort of set that direction and let people experiment and build their own SDLCs and their own pockets of capabilities.
If I could add a bit to that. So the really interesting part around how the manufacturing industry didn't change much. I think one of the big changes that organizations will need to go through is realizing that engineering is no longer the constraint, it's no longer the bottleneck. And so when you have got product roadmaps that look years in advance and they're making all these assumptions, but they are large, big chunks that they're trying to get out the door, when you can do those things much faster, what happens, you might be tempted to constrict that roadmap into many things in parallel, but actually can your customers keep with pace with all of that going out the door? And you might end up with the paradox of choice. When there's too many things for customers to learn, especially if they're public-facing customers, can you degrade customer experience by putting too much stuff out there and not necessarily having the muscle memory of testing and learning, and actually, having really good metrics that give you leading indicators and lagging indicators that might come, again, compressed. If the organization is not set up that way to test and learn, you might end up, pushing out lots of engineering code, but it not being as valuable as you might think it would be for customers, and actually quite jarring for them.
Great. And so for you, Xavier, where do you draw the line on this? So what when you let AI actually touch?
Well, my thing is not about not letting AI touch something. For me, as long as there's a human that stands behind it, you can put what you like out there, but you need to stand behind whatever you're coding. So for me, it's like, fine, go ahead. I don't want to set a restriction on saying, oh, you absolutely cannot do that, because then it kind of puts you on the back foot. So we want to be innovative, we want to keep producing, and we want our engineers to feel like they have autonomy, but with that comes accountability. And so for me, it's like, fine, do it, but if it fails, you own it. So it's not really an absolute not. Well, I say that if my client is in a regulated environment, obviously there's risk around it, but if we're willing to take that risk, at the end of it, if it fails, who owns that responsibility? Who's going to be accountable for the failure, as well as being, taking on board the success? And that's the way I feel about it, rather than saying, let's be restrictive.
Sure. I mean, as we just saw talk about interview processes, would you advocate or discourage AI being part of your recruitment process for an organization?
I definitely would advocate for it.
As long as there's still the human oversight.
As long as there's human oversight.
Great.
Yes.
Cool. Kazir, where would you draw the line?
So I think my view on this is changing on a daily basis. So one of the things that we've done is we've shifted a lot of the kind of understanding of our customers. So we're moving towards acceptance test-driven development. We're moving towards XP processes and practices so that engineers really understand our customers and getting more in touch with them. So that's one aspect, so that they know what they're producing is what's meant to be produced, rather than in the old world of just getting a ticket, you implement whatever's in the ticket and you're done. They really need to understand the wider context. I think the other aspect is really around how do we put some guardrails around our code, so having agents and MCPs that really ensure that we're not introducing vulnerabilities, we're not reducing our performance, so on and so forth. But the current conversation that we're having in our Tech LT is you absolutely need to understand what code is going out the door. But when we get better agents and better capabilities of producing even better code, does it become more about understanding and proving that the tests are correct and that it's following certain constraints? And then the code you become less, intimate with, because your constraints are telling you that the code is working correctly. So you kind of almost like how we don't know how to do assembly code anymore. You abstract above and you set your constraints in place. And as long as you can prove that the code is operating within those constraints, you can ship it without understanding the thousands of lines of code underneath. We're not there yet, but I think I would love to explore that a bit more and not only see what other industries are doing, but see how we can apply some of those practices in less risky areas of our business and see how we get on.
Great. And David, any risk areas that you wouldn't let AI go anywhere near?
I think my view is changing daily, hourly as well. Even last night, went to dinner and we were talking about the very subject, and somebody said, see, I wouldn't let AI near my alt service for obvious reasons. But then, I think we've all seen long pull requests that have had architects, staff engineers, you name it, that have reviewed it, and they went out and they've caused havoc. So I think the guardrails there are really important, the iterative process around how we use AI so that it could be, it's built with AI, but you have ownership on that when it goes out into production. It's it's tenuous, but you know, we all you know, I use Vention, and you know, we pay for a service. Those engineers are great, by the way, but we you know, they come, they go for specific projects. But I and the team own the output of that code, and we wouldn't let them just do what they've done in different places, because we all have different systems and ways of doing it. So, you know, somewhat like that is what I would treat AI. And to finish on that, I think I'm more and more liberal every day with what I would let AI at, but guardrails.
And just to add to that, not just the guardrails, in my experience, especially around legacy systems where I tend to operate, is that you have engineers, there's no documentation, whereas if you let them have AI, you have the documentation, someone else can just step in. But I've been in a lot of situations where we've come in, you have this engineer, everything is in this one engineer's head around this legacy system that has been built into a Frankenstein, and nobody knows, because you had this engineer working on it, that engineer working on it, and the code is a mess, and so you can't bring in someone in to kind of sort it out. It's like, okay, we just burn it down and start again. So I think by being a little bit more relaxed and more liberal with it, you do have, like, you build this agent, and then the next person comes along and can just kind of take it over. But again, having the guardrails and that ownership, so that if that person leaves or whatever reason they're no longer with the company, you don't have to then come back and say, oh my gosh, we don't know where we are with this, and now we have to now recode something else and bolt onto this. And so I think having that makes it more simplified in terms of the tech ecosystem.
Great.
Just to add a bit more onto that, actually. So we've got some greenfield, we've got some legacy systems, and with our legacy systems, we're going through a process of modernization using AI and some specific squads that are uplifting those services. And one of the kind of the debates was, do we kind of take a really unloved service and completely modernize it so that it's got brand new everything, or do we do it iteratively? And so there is still some understanding of what the service is doing as we kind of iterate. But I think the key thing that you touched upon is, you know, getting the stuff out of people's brains, getting it into tests or getting it into an agent so it can reason about whether the right thing is happening. We did a really cool bit of work where we used AI to basically find all the touch points of services with other services and stuff, and inspected the logs and basically figured out how the web of all of our services and how they stuck together. And these things are eye-opening, right? And you don't realize just how much sprawl you've got. You don't realize that there's like extra connections in all these different places. So I think iteratively kind of massaging these things into the right place is definitely a way that we're going, and not trying to move towards a big bang. It's just the pace of the iterations are much faster these days.
Yeah. If I could add to that as well, you know, we've all seen monoliths that fear and trepidation and loading to go in and find out how it actually works. And the bigger it gets, the kind of harder the problem is, and the bigger the elephant in the room. And you know, we've acquired some businesses, and some code bases that have been used by an external agency is no longer there. And we've had some really good success in just what you've just spoken about, where it's like, where do we start? Okay, let's get the cursor going. Takes a few attempts it times out, but it runs through the monolith, and it gives you some starting points. And sometimes that's what you need. The first step can be the hardest, and sometimes AI can just take you on that journey in those examples, which is great.
Great. I've got loads of questions, but I'm seeing several come through on the board, so let's start cracking on through a few of those. How do the panel find the balance between focusing on the best tools now versus in 6 months, where everything will almost certainly change? Obviously, we've already seen that with like RAG being the latest thing, then agentic or orchestrated AI, and then I was using Cursor last year, I'm using Claude Code now. So yeah, anyone want to tackle that question first?
So I think one of the things that we're doing is we're not marrying everything to a particular LLM or a particular agent. We're doing things in a way that are agnostic, so we can replay onto the latest and greatest of wherever anything else is. So we're trying to stay as agnostic as we can, but obviously using what we feel is the tool of the day, but not being super tied into the implementation of how it's done there. We're trying to use standards and protocols that could be applied in lots of different places.
Yeah.
I think there's no loyalty to any of these AI companies right now. If there's anyone that's bad, we're willing to switch very easily. And anything we build, we always make it with the mind of we can switch the model, we can switch what we're going to.
Yeah.
So so the commitment and loyalty aspect of the industry I think is not here at this point. So moving into the next one, quite relevant because we saw a great attack, was it this week or last week? Do you think your teams have a proper understanding of prompt injection? Are we sleepwalking into a wave of dramatic tech disaster? And as the one I mentioned with, what was it, an NPM package where they put prompt injection into the title, wasn't it? And managed to get some bad code, which was live for about 6 hours with people pulling these packages down.
Yeah, speaking from myself and my teams, maybe leaving just move in who are a smaller team and are able to move more quickly. I think it's again a bit of a spectrum around prompting and understanding some of the security concerns around that. We have got SaaS tools that can kind of help us to seam SOC and tools like Aikido. But I think it is, it's an area of improvement for sure.
Sure. I mean, would you say that's a training piece or is it a technical challenge where we're putting guardrails in?
Yeah, I think it's both. Just back to that sort of AI operating model, which we're due to release across Tillo. Which will be a living document, sort of principles and practicalities on ways of working. And we really want to iterate on that as we do on our skills and our AI estate as well.
Great,
Yep.
Cool.
We have a 4-week boot camp that all brand new engineers go through. And existing engineers will go through that as well. It's just a slightly more condensed version. And as you said, continuously iterating on it. As we learn more from a security perspective or various different aspects, we're continuously updating our agents as well. So we've got agents that run on our code that look at things from a security perspective, performance perspective, etc. So I think part of it is teaching the engineers themselves, and part of it is developing our agents and developing our the ability for us to kind of force multiply our devs as well. So I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
Yes, same here. It's training, absolutely. I gave the example that you have some who are refusing AI, but those who are very eager, also without the judgment. And so we said, fine, you can use it, but you have to be trained on it. And that is like, you don't get to use AI unless you've gone through the proper channels of training, which I think helps. But even with the training, I found that sometimes there's a lack of judgment. So.
Sure, but you still allow experimentation, I assume, from the early stages. You just mean you can't use these tools for production use
Exactly.
without the training.
Exactly, and those guardrails being in place.
Great. And it's great to hear boot camps and those type of training stuff as well. Sorry.
Yeah. No, just a boot camp inspired me to talk about our in Tillo. We've got about 5 under our belt now. So quarterly, what we called in the beginning, we called engineering AI community days, and what we're calling now is community days. And that's a place where we sort of eased into AI, started to experiment, started to use tools in a test environment together, and a hackathon in many ways, but more than that, a learning journey together and playing back that to the business. And then, where we are now, we're actually solving real problems. We're shipping code. We're leaving a little bit of time in our sprints as well. If we don't ship something in a complete day, we have time afterwards. So there's real tangible results for the business, but the learning and the community aspect is really, really powerful. I can't talk about that enough.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at our place, hackathons, we do one every 3 months. I like to try and challenge them by giving them something like beat the CTO. So I'll do something and they've got to do something better than me using these tools. It's a great motivator to try and knock me down a few pegs. And we're looking at more advanced engineering stuff now, like being able to convert a COBOL application into Rust, where the engineers don't know either language. See if it's possible. Obviously, it's nothing for production, but just to really push their capabilities and get them to understand what is possible. Moving on to the next question. Do your engineers really want to spend all their time reviewing AI output? How do you leverage their creativity and wider skills than just coding in that world? I think that's a common challenge. I think we found definitely when you first embed these tools into the system and suddenly the PRs are massive, as has been mentioned. Your thoughts?
I think for me, at least, I talked a bit about XP. I think if we think about prompt engineering, where you just prompt it once, whatever generates, you ship it, then you're probably doing the wrong thing. And if you're just reviewing exactly what it puts out in one go, probably also maybe need to adjust the way of thinking about how you use it. We pair with it, and so we're continuously generating iterative code as we go along. Using that approach, that engineer can ship that code. But if it's something a bit more complex or a bit more in a risky space, we do some code reviews as well. But the intent that you don't understand your code at all that's being generated, and then you have to review it all in one go, we're not really doing that. We're doing things iteratively. We've got ways for us to ship stuff in a dark way, so it's in production without anyone else seeing it, so we can run smoke tests, we can run things in prod to check that things are working as well. So it's just about changing your mindset with how you're delivering software and doing things in a smaller way and doing it more iteratively, rather than it being a big bang, getting all the stuff out the door in one go, and there being this big review where everyone has to sit together and make sure that the code is all right.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think for me, 3 things. It's about taste, systems thinking, and orchestration. Taste is subjective, but we're human. We have senses and we have feelings, and we know the design language, know the org. The systems thinking piece I simply think will never go away. We've got foundations in computer science. We've got experience. We understand, or we should understand our business, how it moves, how it's structured. And orchestration is a new capability, right, in an agentic world where we use a lot of tools, and we may use them together in a symphony of solutions, and I think that's an emerging skill that everybody needs to hone in on and understand. And how can we pull those things together so that they're part of the solution rather than looking at them as problematic.
Moving on to the next question. Tavia, probably be good for this one. So what are the bottlenecks in the new world with increased code and feature generation? If it's not QA, what else? Obviously, we've just touched on the pull request piece. What are you seeing, and how are you advising about the extra challenges by having AI in these processes?
So for me, the bottleneck, it's not so much the code, because we're moving at a faster velocity, but I find that decision ownership is not keeping up. So what I mean by that is when we're producing things that are now going into production at a faster rate, and then the accountability and saying, well, who owns this? And the bottleneck comes when people are like, well, I'm not sure. And then there's a bunch of finger pointing going on. So I'm finding like the engineers are doing their jobs, and it's like, oh, we're producing, but it's like, okay, but who owns this in terms of the business on that side? And so I just kind of find like it's more about the decision ownership becomes the bottleneck now. That's what I'm finding in my current environment.
Cool.
So in our world, as I mentioned before, if you are no longer constrained by engineering, then your problem moves somewhere else, and it becomes the ideas that are being generated, and whether you've thought those things through, you know what your leading indicators are, that these are the right things that customers actually want, and you've got lagging indicators to tell you that you've achieved your goal. One of the other bottlenecks now is things like compliance and finance and all that kind of stuff. So one of the changes that I'm making in UK and Ireland for IG is to move towards them, the initiatives not being product and tech initiatives, but being the organizational initiatives. So everyone has got skin in the game, and people are brought on as part of the discovery phase. And so we are moving as an organization to deliver a new feature rather than it being concentrated in technology and product. And that way we can kind of unlock compliance being part of the journey, finance being part of the journey, security and so on. These other divisions in the organization not being a barrier to release, but actually being part of what we're trying to do as an initiative. So that's an ongoing journey, but that's a key thing that we're trying to move towards. And that means we get better acceptance criteria, better acceptance test criteria. We automate that through coding, and then we can fly out the door without any major worries.
Great. Cool. So just skipping to the second one, actually, because this lines up with one of my questions. So are you still hiring junior engineers? How do you see the career path changing, or how have you seen it change over like the last 12 months? How do you set up juniors for success? David?
Yeah, I am not hiring junior engineers, but I do want to change that narrative. Look, I would hire a junior engineer over a senior engineer in the following circumstances. If one of my interview questions now is, do you like code or do you like building things? So I really want to look for that builder mindset. And I'm being divisive by saying there's two types of engineers, there's many types of engineers, and you can be both types of engineers. But if I speak to a senior engineer today and they have skepticism or aren't using it, but by the way, last year, my views were different, and next year they'll be different again. I wonder, why aren't you using it? If you're not using AI, what else are you not using? Why is that a limitation for you? Is that the sort of, a fixed mindset that you're not going to come on a journey with us and what we want to do? So, I would, my heart bleeds for graduates, these memes going around about computer science graduates, working at McDonald's. Certainly wasn't a lot of people in the room's experience. So I really want to lean into that because as we all know, like these token costs will go up, people will age, the knowledge will, dwindle from our industry, and there'll be a correction at some point. So we need to nurture new talent and bring in engineers who have got that mindset. Not vibe coders, but they are AI engineers in the truest sense, in the holistic sense.
Without the bad habits of being a traditional coder.
Yeah. I was a poor computer science graduate. Stack Overflow and code project stuff like that. You don't want me at that age, but yeah. Cool. Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think how do we set them up for success is about teaching them judgment skills. I find with seniors, they have a certain mindset and they're like set in their ways, whereas juniors come in, they're more eager, but it's about coaching them as well and saying, here's where you use judgment, here's where you teach them accountability, whereas seniors are like, I know everything. So it is a different mindset, and they're a little bit easier not to mold, as to say, but they don't come in with these preconceived notions and judgments around how things should be done, and they're more flexible, I find, from that.
I think, like, in a year's time, we'll be probably doing the opposite. We'll be hiring loads of juniors and saying, we don't need all these seniors because everything's so great. And the things that get generated are really great. So I think the real level setter here is, can people solve problems? And are they able to take a very complex problem and decompose it into smaller parts? I think that's the thing that I'd be looking for in junior engineers is how do they approach problems rather than how much code can they crank out. So yeah, I think we'll have a very different conversation in about a year's time.
Okay, great. With only a very short couple of minutes left, just one of my questions to finish off then. Everyone's invested in AI tooling, training and process change. What do you expect to see as a benefit to the business in 12 months' time?
I'll go first. I think in 12 months' time, I think we should have better accountability and ownership. So again, it's always been, from my experience, it's like we always can point at IT and say, oh, you're not, the reason this is behind is because you're not producing fast enough. Well, we've taken that out of the equation now with AI. So for me, it's about making faster judgment, but better judgment as well about what you said earlier about, do our customers want this? And now that we can give them a lot more, and about how we approach what we're producing for our customers, and how we think about that process. Even if we do it iteratively, it's like, should we be doing it, and how do we do it better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the answer is a classical engineering answer, which is it depends. And I think the real deterministic factor of whether you're going to get the ROI or not is how customer-centric the business is. The business doesn't really understand their customers and never really had to, because they were operating at such a slow pace that everything that they were releasing was going to be a home run because they're behind their competitors. If they are not constrained by that anymore, it just really depends on how much they understand their customers and how much they can kind of relinquish to using metrics to tell them what to do, rather than what they dreamed up themselves without asking their customers.
Great. David finishes off.
Oh, I don't want to have the last word because the talk here has been fantastic. But I just simplify it. I was just thinking about that as you asked. Revenue and reliability, really. Can we increase the value of for our shareholders and for our business, and obviously can we do that reliably and consistently, and without falling off the edge of a cliff and creating catastrophe for our production systems. But yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's all we've got time for. So thank you very much to our panelists, and they're around this afternoon if you want to catch up with any of them later on. So thank you.
Thank you.